So you've got a protocol on mainnet that requires storage. Is there a relationship, and how does that relationship look like on a technical level?
Yeah, no. So it's more of those things like very much the same thing. So the L1 itself is providing the storage itself, and it's aggregating all of these things into a single layer. So there's no communication per se. It's just the L1 both incentivizes this capacity and also the computation side as well, and also maintains the demand side as well. So it's a single layer that aggregates all of those things.
Quick one, nothing here is financial advice. It's for entertainment and educational purposes only. Always do your own research or speak to a financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Enjoy the episode and like and subscribe.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Another founder series, but an interesting one, a topic that people are very familiar with, data storage on-chain, but this one's quite different. We have Josh, founder from Irys. Really, really interesting programmable data. Didn't know what it meant before I started researching this, but it's something that all of you are familiar with. You've seen various iterations of it in the past. But before we get into it, intro, Josh, welcome. It's great to have you, sir. I know you've been super busy, and it's great to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. No, I'm excited.
Great. Josh, just a brief introduction in terms of obviously your journey in crypto. Where did it start, and how did you land up in the crazy place that we're in at the moment?
Yeah, so I've been in the world of crypto now for probably 4.5 years, and but got very deep into it in late 2020. So I was studying computer science at the time in the UK, and I got into the world of crypto. Obviously, built a lot of conviction around the space, and specifically on the kind of the decentralized money side of the space, which is its original roots, but actually fell like much deeper into the infrastructure side of the space, just because that's where my technical leaning was. I used to do a lot more stuff on database internals and other low level things, and yeah, discovered the storage networks. So the kind of the Arweaves, the Filecoin, Sia storage, even Chia back then as well. This was kind of late 2020, early 2021, and really kind of fell in love with the what I felt were there were kind of like two visions for these networks, and one was kind of more philosophical, which is whichever kind of storage network one would essentially become this kind of canonical record of history or some source of truth for humanity in some way, which I felt like was kind of this societally very big thing. And then on the more kind of utilitarian side was more that crypto has been very indexed on these financial rails with things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, now Solana. And but the web is actually built mostly on these kind of data rails, so to speak, data infrastructure rails. And my question, like in my head back then, was kind of how do we bring that infrastructure on chain in some way? And my general view at the time was that storage networks, being that they're optimized, kind of, the idea is to optimize for data, could be that foundation for that kind of on-chain future for the web. So yeah, I was kind of nerd sniped by that, and I got very initially very deep into the Arweave ecosystem, and that's where Irys began, and we started essentially as an L2 for Arweave. But yeah, that's kind of the quick intro, and I'm happy to dive a little bit more into kind of the Irys side of things as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, like, what's really interesting about what we neglect to actually like take note of is that data needs to be stored, within the context of a blockchain. It's like it's obvious when you think about it, but you don't really when you kind of like, aping into shit coins and doing all the crazy stuff that people do, whether you're borrowing, lending, it doesn't matter. Point is, data needs to be stored. How does that data get stored in its current form? And then kind of like I want to get into like a chain that is specifically attributed to data storage, which is essentially what Irys does. Is that correct?
Yeah, partially, and I'd say a lot more, and I'll dive a little
Okay,
bit
well then
more.
let's start there and then come back to the data storage.
Yeah. So we announced, I guess to dive in there, we announced Irys as the first programmable data chain now a week ago from recording time, and the way I kind of talk about this is the goal for this chain and why we built a whole L1 as well. And we can talk about why we did that, is how do we build a unified chain that is optimized for applications that rely that essentially rely on data to operate and scale. And I can kind of dive into some examples of that, but I think there are a lot of deeper networks like Grass, or a lot of kind of AI related use cases as well, where this becomes really interesting. But like to kind of like zoom out a little bit, like the core idea is, again, like the web is built on mostly these data infrastructure rails. The question is, how do we bring that on chain? And that's kind of the ultimate end vision for Irys as a programmable data chain. And to kind of like dive straight into your question of like, how does this kind of differ? So the way I kind of like to visualize it is like, yes, Irys does provide the ability to store like large amounts of data, and we can talk about how that differs to things like Ethereum. And you can do that both temporarily and permanently. So you can pay once and store data for 30 days, or store it for basically forever. And then also, how do we, and like Irys essentially enables a kind of closely coupled execution. And really what that means is that you can upload some data and then use that within a VM, or use that within kind of L2 networks and other kind of and other solutions. So the thesis behind Irys is like, how do we enable as much kind of utility at the base layer, and then that will build network effects for the entire chain, for the entire economy around it as well. But yeah, so that's kind of the idea. It's kind of storage and execution and liquidity all within a single layer. And so to then answer the question of how does this differ to something like let's say Ethereum and Solana? Well, the way I kind of think about it is that when you store data using something like Ethereum, you're basically paying for every single validator on the chain to store that data forever. And if you think about it, how many validators there are on Ethereum, it's like 5 digits or something, right? It's a large number of people storing the data. So you have to incentivize a lot of storage that is kind of redundant at that point. And it doesn't functionally scale. There are a lot of kind of limits to storing data on Ethereum, right? So I think, I don't know the exact numbers, but Ethereum, a gigabyte is some number of millions of dollars. Like it's fairly expensive, which is crazy to think. When you buy a hard drive, you can buy pretty large hard drives, terabytes worth of for like $10, so or 20, $30. So yeah, so the idea behind a data chain is how do you build the chain such that it's optimized to store information, and therefore you can have a single transaction in a single block that represents a petabyte of data. So we're talking about kind of incentivizing, creating a chain which can store 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 20 orders of magnitude more data. So that's kind of the core difference there.
So is that kind of like the core difference between something that people are very familiar with, is obviously Filecoin being one of the first, and obviously Arweave as well? I mean, how is it? I mean, it sounds like it's an upgrade in many ways. This is like we're upgrading. This is what it looks like. So what are the differences around that?
Yeah, so the way I can talk about data chains is there are different flavors, or essentially different types, but I like to say flavors. Yeah. It's a little bit more fun. But when you think about something like Arweave, it's essentially the first kind of iteration of a permanent data chain, where its core functionality is pay once, you pay a single time fee, and your data should be around in 100, 200, 300 years time. We can kind of talk about how you can model that out. And then on the Filecoin side, at least up to kind of more recently, it's been very focused on essentially temporary storage would be kind of one abstraction. I think, to be fair to Filecoin, they are kind of what they would call themselves a storage marketplace, where you have a bunch of people providing kind of storage hardware on one side, and a bunch of people on the demand side wanting to store information, essentially. And it's a marketplace for those two people. But the idea at a core level, the core service that it provides, is this kind of temporary verifiable form of storage. And the core idea with Irys is, look, like data chains are interesting, but by themselves can't build network effects. Why? And the idea behind Irys is like, okay, how do we enable more utility at the base layer that will essentially enable these network effects? So like functionally, what the difference is here is that essentially Filecoin enables this kind of temporary verifiable form of storage, and then Arweave typically provides this kind of permanent form of storage. And Irys is the first programmable data chain, enables both of those things, coupled with the ability to actually interact with that data within a VM, essentially. So it's about like using that data programmably, essentially, programmatically. Sorry, English. So we essentially call this programmable data that you can program within the VM. That's kind of the core idea, the core unlock as well.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting because we kind of like see like or perceive data to be something that's, I don't know, it's almost like this object, and now you're saying, well, it's an object that can do things beyond just being an object. I know that sounds really silly, but like just trying
No,
to
it doesn't.
like just trying to understand like how it moves from just being an object to being programmable and also being a chain on its own. How does that actually like make things better? I mean, I know that it's also like it's quite an obvious question, but can you just explain that like so that people can actually appreciate kind of like the magnitude of this tech?
Yeah, so I guess the question is like why L1 to some great lesser degree as well? Like why are we building it
Yes.
as an
Why
L1?
why an
Yeah,
L1? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'll give a pretty like functional answer, which is I think if you want to build a data chain, it needs to be kind of censorship resistant. This is the core. This is like the core reason you build a data chain, because like if it's not censorship resistant, then you're basically building like AWS, like an actual like centralized AWS.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is essentially with an L1. If you look at the L2 route, then you end up either centralizing or you actually increase costs, i.e., like the cost of running the whole kind of chain L2, whatever you want to call it, is actually higher than just running it as an L1. And the reason you should care about how much it costs to run an L1 versus an L2, functionally for a data chain, is because if it's more expensive to run, then you charge users more. And therefore, like the service, the actual like storing of information is more expensive. So the long answer is, the short answer is, it makes it cheaper, believe it or not, and we can talk about how.
Okay. So how does it make it cheaper from I mean from an infrastructure perspective? Do you need less validators? Is it a validator thing? Proof of stake versus proof of work. I mean, what are the dynamics around the L1? So what is it built around, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah. So the core idea is, I would say that the answer to that question is mostly in the consensus mechanism. So nowadays, most chains are obviously a proof of stake, which is basically which is people putting up capital to secure the network. Irys is actually a combination of both proof of work and proof of stake, in the sense that miners are doing work to create blocks and kind of reap rewards from the network. And also they have to put up collateral and stake in order to participate. So there are locked up tokens that miners have staked to participate, but they're also doing a bunch of computation.
Okay.
And the reason that's important is because we actually use a useful proof of work, where the work is actually a core function of the network. So it's actually the useful proof of work is verifying the stored information. So
Okay.
it's not like Bitcoin where it's wasteful. It's actually this very useful form of computation, which needs to happen anyway. And it means that we don't have to have a fairly aggressive inflation curve compared like proof of stake, meaning that there's essentially less tokens being printed. Therefore, there's kind of less sell pressure on it. The idea is that there will be less sell pressure on the token, because the more you inflate, the more sell pressure there is.
Yeah, we've seen that. There's been many examples of that. I want to just kind of like just move away from the tech for a bit so we can come back to it. And I wanted to just get into, obviously, you guys have been quite strategic from my perspective, anyways, in terms of how you've gone about launching this project. I know that you recently came out of stealth. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about that in terms of what your roadmap looks like right now. So, we've got an understanding of the tech, really interesting. What does the delivery look like on this? Tell us about that from stealth to market and the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the short answer is that we came out stealth a week ago. The next big milestone is a close, like a basically we have a kind of small closed test net, but kind of a more open closed test net. We'll be able to onboard more people to actually use this thing, and then the step after that will be a public test net and then mainnet. That's basically the road to mainnet, and everything kind of is focuses on the end goal.
Great. And I mean, there's obviously, you did mention, um, the launch of a token, I would assume, and the role that it has to play. And like any protocol, and I mean, especially with our community, like within the blockmates community, there's the question, like, where does the opportunity lie for, investment and the rest of it from that perspective? I mean, you mentioned miners, there obviously might be an opportunity there. Validators, yeah, break it down for us from a purely selfish financial gain perspective.
So yeah, so to talk a little bit about the kind of the economics, I'll do one little technical thing, and then I'll talk about
Okay,
the
go.
more selfish,
Yeah,
the
that's cool. Yeah.
the selfish parts. So the network essentially like provides rewards to people who are basically storing data. That's the core idea. So
Yeah.
you need to basically buy a bunch of hard drives and some other kind of small bits of hardware to run a miner, and then you need some capital to basically stake. Like it's as I said, a combination of both proof of work and proof of stake. And the in terms of the opportunities, one is obviously running a miner is one way to do it. Obviously, some people don't have the DevOps experience to do that, and maybe just don't enjoy doing it. And I don't blame them. So there are definitely going to be some interesting kind of native DeFi opportunities on the chain as well. So the cool thing about data chains is they will essentially have this quite niche set of DeFi primitives, just simply as a function of the way that these data chains work. And a good example would be there's liquid staking, lending or leasing, depending on how you want to look at it. And the core idea is that miners need to stake. Let's say miners need to stake $10. I'm making numbers up. $10 in order to participate and win mining awards. Well, some people don't want to go and buy $10. They will actually borrow $10 of Irys tokens and give a percentage of the mining awards or the yield back to the people who lended the tokens out. And that's going to be, I guess, one of the more native ways to get yield within the ecosystem. And think of it as a way of arbitraging block rewards. So if there are kind of $10 million a year worth of block rewards, then some percentage of that will be given back to people who are lending out tokens. So yeah, I think that's one interesting way. I can't predict other ways, other like interesting DeFi primitives. I'm sure there'll be other yield bearing opportunities that relate to our ecosystem, but that's like something concrete that we'll definitely have.
And I assume that the yield is kind of a derivation of partnerships that you guys do, and obviously people paying you to store the data and to move it around per se. I mean, what does the business model look like in its essence?
Yeah, so in terms of the whole network, I always look at it as a demand supply side. To some greater or less degree, this is a deep in network. So the
Okay.
supply side is kind of miners providing storage and hard drives. The demand side is people wanting to store information. And also the cool thing, because we have execution, it's also people wanting to do computation as well, right? Or move liquidity around or other kind of DeFi related things. So um, the the revenue for a miner, it comes from two things. One, it comes from inflation, which is typical for most kind of early networks, and then two, it's coming from fees that of people that one want to store data, and then two want to do stuff with the VM, do stuff with Irys's VM essentially. So in terms of how that ties back to the lending side, is that whatever miners are getting, you'll essentially be getting a percentage of their rewards that come from both fees and inflation.
So, I mean, obviously, like something that's really curious to me is like it's an L1, right? So, is it kind of like what is the relationship between the L1 and say mainnet? So, how do you provision like communication between the two? Is it kind of like a bridging network? I mean, how does that work, and how do you actually connect it, connect the two in terms of that relationship, in terms of how you relay information between the two? Or is that not
Wait,
what's happening?
between the two, between L1 and
So you're in L1, right? And then
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
actually so you're actually provisioning data storage for mainnet. So you've got a protocol on mainnet that requires storage. Is there a relationship, and how does that relationship look like on a technical level?
Yeah, no. So it's more of those things, like very much the same thing. So the L1 itself is providing the storage itself, and it's aggregating all of these things into a single layer. So there's no communication per se. It's just the L1 both
Okay.
incentivizes this capacity, and also the computation side as well, and then also maintains the demand side as well. So it's a single layer that kind of aggregates all of those things.
Okay, so that's a bit of an aha moment for me. Okay, that's really interesting. And then in terms of like your roadmap at the moment, just coming back to that, so you guys have just come out of stealth. What's currently in place? And like from a technical side of things and testnet, mainnet, what does that all look like for you guys over the next weeks, months?
Yeah. So right now, you can do very simple things. You can store data permanently right now and temporarily, and that runs kind of on a very small test net that we're running. I think the next step will be like fully getting the whole, like phasing in the whole part of the chain, so including Iris VM, and you'll be able to deploy smart contracts and do a bunch of interesting things there. And then thereafter, it's really about, okay, public testnet. How do we get kind of community involved here? How do we get more miners initially on board, and basically bringing in way more stakeholders onto the network? So like phase one is get initial builders and obviously like test the thing, but really like getting that initial builder set. And then phase two is like, how do we actually bring in the communities to interact with this chain and do a bunch of interesting things with the apps on the chain. And then phase three is, okay, how do we go to mainnet? And that's when perhaps some of the interesting stuff happens.
Okay. So interesting stuff that can happen. It seems like there's a number of narratives that can play out with this thing. Um, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Deepen, AI. What else is there? I mean, it seems like this thing can be fully stacked.
Yeah, so I kind of like kind of break up the use cases almost into two sections.
Yeah.
Some use cases are like pure storage plays, right? So they just want to store information. So you can think about, I mean, Deepin's true, AI is true. I mean, the NFT space, social fi, these are things where you just need to store information. And then there are a set of use cases which I think like Iris will be perfect for, to have like a full stack application or protocol. So I use Deepin as a good example because that's an example where those protocols rely on data to operate and scale. So again, looking at something like Grass, which is a Deepin network where they aggregate, they basically get they incentivize kind of consumer users like me and you to aggregate data from the internet, and they can sell data to people and give some of that revenue back to the users in some way. That's kind of the core idea. So that's again like a business or a protocol that like very much revolves around data and could have the whole protocol kind of built on Iris. And again, the goal is to prioritize and optimize for those kind of use cases. So I think Deepin's a really interesting one. Just to like double click on AI a little bit, I think fundamentally AI is the same again. It's like data to operate and scale. And some examples there is that on the more simpler end, it's like model storage. But if you think about kind of expanding towards, if we get to a world where we actually do have AI agents, and it's likely that those kind of agents would live in a decentralized world in some way, then they would prefer to use decentralized technologies. And they will need some kind of decentralized coordination there, or a way to perform microtransactions to pay for it, basically pay each other. And again, like that's something where Iris is optimizing for those kind of applications that really rely on data. And then like beyond that, I think that the third one that I'm most interested in is consumer, and also like this kind of ties into our wider strategy. And if you saw our launch, like you'll see that we were kind of focused on two things there, right? Like one is talk about what we're doing, but two is actually like set the culture, set the tone a little bit, because we want to be like both a fun place, but a place where we're building real tech as well. We're trying to like be somewhere in the middle, and that will be useful for attracting these kind of consumer use cases onto the chain. So I think those are the ones that I'm most excited about in the short term.
And then I mean, obviously, there's like the popular ones that we've seen on other L1s. Like obviously, like you get SocialFi, and there's like, there's obviously essentially what you're saying is that whatever the demand is, you guys can essentially provide whatever is required to meet that demand with a combination of proof of stake, proof of work in terms of kind of like maximizing revenues, and then obviously maximizing the kind of relationship that those protocols potentially have within that environment. Your thoughts around like introducing another L1? Do you think maybe there's a challenge there in terms of like finding that market fit? I mean, what do you think about, like about that process? Like how do we go to market? Has there been a strategy around that, or do you have kind of like this idea that, well, we'll build it and they'll come?
Definitely building it and will come is a meme at this point and not true. I actually have a lot of fairly strong opinions regarding how people used to run L1s and go to market 5 years ago compared to now is basically a totally different game. And I recently tweeted actually about how philosophical messaging, so messaging that leans too much on the philosophical end and less on the utilitarian side, you're basically you're going to fail. Like people have kind of seen through that kind of that crap basically to use
Yeah.
nicer words. So our general view is we are both we really want to focus on that demand side of the network, which is get some of those foundational use cases where we truly believe like we are like the best place to build this kind of applications, which is why you'll see that I didn't list out 1,000 different categories. There are really only 3 that I care about in the short term, because like we just want to show the world that like we are the best place to operate for so we are the best place to deploy applications which rely on data to operate and scale. Like that is our fundamental kind of mission here, especially in the short term. So I think like being very focused is kind of what one core idea. I think the second idea when it kind of relates to go to market for these things is again like have a very clear culture. So I said kind of both a place that is fun and also that has real tech, and we're not trying to like we are trying to build something that will one kind of be useful for applications, but also kind of change society also long term as well. And basically being welcoming to everyone as well, because building an L1 is actually I always talk about it as building 2 businesses. You could even split it into 3, but I think really 2 businesses, right? It's like, okay, how do I build the demand side for this, and then also like how do I build this community? Because it's very different to building a traditional business, and you've got to have a very different strategy for both sides as well. So I think our general view is that as long as we kind of execute on that and we become a place where people want to be, that is like fun and you just want to be there the whole time, then we'll do okay. And I think that's where other L1s and L2s have struggled to actually differentiate themselves by not having a very clear culture.
Yeah, I think it's a really good answer, by the way. I think you've hit it head on. The community side of things is something that I think a lot of founders don't really pay attention because they're so steadfast and sure about the product, and a lot of the time the product is amazing, but they don't focus as much attention, if not more, on the community side of things. And I think if you can get a balance between the two, you really do have a recipe for success, and obviously you recognize that. So good on you for doing that, because I've seen a lot of amazing founders, like truly like genius kind of stuff, but they don't get to the place where they need to get to because they didn't focus enough on the community side of things. And I mean, speaking about community, are you guys planning to incentivize kind of like the pre-launch official launch on kind of like a mainnet or end product process? I mean, is there something that people can participate in? I suppose it's an opportunity for you to kind of let the audience know like what you guys are doing to incentivize and motivate people to come and check it out.
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is we actually haven't decided what if any incentives. So I can't even I don't want to be one of those projects that like promises something and then it works. So we actually don't exactly know. But what I can tell you about the community side is the phase we're at right now is we are really focused on building that kind of curated small community initially. Like we're not trying to go too big too quickly, because we really again like we're very focused on culture. It's that if this is a culture you feel like you resonate with, then you should join this like now very small community where you are in the trenches with me, head of community, and some of our core team members essentially. So that's really the phase we're at right now, and we don't want to kind of we could blow up our numbers tomorrow if we wanted to, but we really want to
Yes.
focus on building a place where people actually want to be, and we'll make sure that it's worth a while.
Yeah, I mean it's really cool to see that there is that awareness. Like once again, don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but it's kind of like a lot of the time it does become like I want to get big fast, and I don't care what the costs are. It's kind of like the chart that goes parabolic, and we all know what happens when a chart is up only all the way. It's kind of, it always ends in tears, and I think the same applies for community. Kind of like it's something that you do need to work on, and yeah, good luck with that. I think it's probably going to land up being one of your most valuable assets. um, and when you do get it right, you'll see. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it already in other communities. um, Difficult to replicate, but that's what makes community, is that you're not really replicating, you're kind of making something your own, which
Correct.
clearly you guys are doing at the moment. um, where do you think kind of like programmable data, like as a, like if you looked in a crystal ball and you kind of like could predict what the future looked like around programmable data, is it something that you believe can actually play like a major role in terms of how like crypto and blockchain technology evolves? Is it a nice to have? Is it an important part about what you guys are building? Do you think it will become something that will be super important? How do you see that from now going into the future?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what time horizon we look at, but I'll give you kind of my general answer here. I think, as I kind of said, crypto has been very indexed on these financial rails, less on the data
Yeah.
side, and that's actually been expressed in how people are using crypto, right? And our general view is that by enabling more at the base layer and to be more extensible as well, I allow people to build more interesting things. Is basically what that means. Then we will over time see more migration of these kind of web services to kind of fully on-chain crypto rails. That's kind of the core idea. So the short answer is yes. It of course may take some time, but really, as long as we continue to make the base layer more, like basically enshrine more utility at the base layer, make it more useful, basically, then we will see more and more interesting use cases come up over time. That's really, it's a very simple thesis.
Yeah, and I mean that's it obviously like falls perfectly in line with kind of like the different narratives that can obviously, you know, come out of this whole thing. It's just whether you can deliver the platform or the L1 to allow for those protocols to come in, which it sounds like you guys have got a clear strategy around. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this thing develops and grows. And just in terms of like your timelines at the moment, I mean, we won't hold you to it, but what are you guys looking at in terms of your test net at the moment? You did mention like quite a small one. Where are you hoping to be in the calendar year? I mean, what does it look like for you guys?
Yeah, we definitely can't commit to any kind of specific timelines for things like mainnet, but at least in the very short term, uh, I our major priority is make sure this is a place where builders want to be. So getting the like a fully like the fully featured closed testnet out. I think that will be done on a really relatively short term basis in the next kind of month or two, like very short term. But community won't see like too much marketing around that, just because it's more of a closed thing for us internally to get people on board. But obviously, the community will see like the showcase of these use cases over time, which will be the interesting thing. But other than that, definitely can't commit to any more timelines. But if you do want to get more alpha, which you won't get from just Twitter, then obviously feel free to join the community as well. That's where all the alpha is.
So tell us where, and yeah, are you guys hanging out in Discord? Yeah,
Yeah,
give us some intel here.
yeah. So the community is mostly hosted on Discord. So if you want to do all the really fun stuff, then Discord is the place to be. We also do have and by the way, just go to our website irys.xyz and you'll see all the links. But Telegram, we do have a chat, but I think Discord is the most fun in my opinion. I don't know, just my view of the world. And if you just want to speak to me, I'm terminally online. As long as I'm awake, I will basically respond sub-second. So always feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or Telegram. It's the same username. And yeah, just always happy to riff and chat about things.
Yeah, always good to meet founders who are in the trenches.
Yeah.
Yeah, it always works out. I promise you.
I love it. It's the best part
Yeah.
it's the best part of what I do, to be honest.
Yeah, it is the best part. I completely agree, and I completely agree with you on Discord. I mean, that's where we run our community as well. And yeah, it's a great place. Made some great friendships, and it's a great, yeah, it's the only place really to do it. So yeah, good luck. Yeah, it's been really cool to have you on, Josh. Really interesting. Really look forward to actually coming and visiting and checking what you guys are building. And yeah, I think it's really interesting for us as a community. Like, we always like try and find the interesting stuff in the space, and this is one of those. So yeah, we'll keep an eye out, and maybe we can get you in 6 months' time, a year, and see how you guys are doing, and catch up with you. But yeah, I really appreciate your time, and we'll see you out there.
I would love that, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Yeah, and to anyone who's listening, just go and check out Irys. The website's super cool. Yeah, I love the dev-centric side of it, but it's also like, it looks good, and you guys have got some great info out there. I really like the opportunity around kind of like the mining side of things, proof of stake, proof of work. I think there's plenty of opportunity there, and yeah, we'll keep an eye out on obviously your token launch as well. Yeah, so take it easy, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Till next time, all the best.
All right, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a like, subscribe, and turn the notification bell on for next time. See ya.